Hi guys, this is the video for chapter 7, lesson 1 and lesson 2. So in this chapter, we are taking a look at percentages. Now, if I were to ask you, what is a percentage? Would you be able to tell me what it is? So I'll give you a second to think while I set this up here. So if you said a percentage is something out of 100, then you nailed it. Now, a percentage is really just anything apart to a whole ratio. So a percentage is a ratio where you're comparing a part to a whole, and the whole is always going to be 100. So remember in our previous chapter, we talked about a part to a whole, and this is what we call a ratio. So when you're comparing two amounts, a part to a whole or a part to another part, right? So comparing two numbers is a ratio. Well, a percentage is really just a consistent way to describe a ratio where it's always out of 100. So when we think of percentages, we now can recognize, okay, 90% is greater than 10%. And so you guys are probably familiar with percentages and using them in daily life as well, especially with your grades and stuff. But you have a clear recognition of greater and lesser values of percentages. And that's so much easier to understand and translate than looking at a fraction or just a regular ratio. Like if I said, 4 fifths and 5 eighths, which one's greater? They are both a little bit above half. And so you might have to think a little bit, okay, is 4 fifths greater or is 5 eighths greater? But if we turned both of these into a percentage, you would see very clearly exactly which one's greater. So let's turn a percent into a fraction first. So if I had like 63%, how would I change this into a fraction? Well, if I know that 63% is really just 63 out of 100, then really I can turn any of my percentages as a fraction over 100, and that will become my fraction. So if I gave you 52.5%, how would you turn this into a fraction? Well, we would make this 52.5 over 100, right? And this might not be the best way of describing our fraction. We don't usually want to put a fraction over a fraction. So maybe I could change this to a decimal. Okay, but the idea is the same, right? 52.5 over 100. What if I have 450%? Well, same thing, right? I'm going to turn this into a fraction over 100. So that percentage over 100, which really means I have, greater than 100% here. I have 450%. So if you wanted to simplify this fraction and make this 4 and 50 over 100 and then reduce that and make that 4.5, you could, but really our goal right now is to write our percentage as a fraction over 100 because we want to really be familiar with this idea. So let's take a look at our study guide. On our study guide, they've given us a visual of really what a percentage is. Well, 30% is 30 out of 100, and that's how we describe our percentages. And then there's 4 examples here. 4 of them are ones that I did with you or similar to what I did with you. And then we've got a decimal as well, like 0.8%. We would just write that as 0.8 over 100. And then we don't really want a decimal in our fraction because a decimal is just another way of writing a fraction. So we would then write this as so what you could do is multiply the top and bottom by 10 and make this 8 over 1,000. And so I didn't reduce my fractions or simplify them in my examples I gave you, but here we can see that we want to simplify and reduce our fractions. So 65% becomes 65 out of 100. Reduced, it's 13 out of 20. 45 or 450% becomes 450 over 100. Reduced, that's 4.5, which I did with you guys, right? And then we have 37.5. So writing this as a fraction, so you could even reduce this if you wanted, divide by 100. So like this became 37 over 37.5 over 100 became a simplified fraction of 75 over 2. And that divided by 100, right? So I think they just divided and then wrote it as what that was. Okay, so and then divided by 100, multiply the reciprocal, and then it's 3/8. So you can kind of see the process of them reducing the fraction, which you've done before and you know how to do. So what we're going to do next is just practice this a little bit. Write this as a percentage over 100. So make sure you reduce all your fractions. That's just another thing we're going to review. So writing this, if you want to just write them as the fraction first, right? Just get in the habit, okay, 5 out of 100, right? This would be 17 out of 100. This would be 0.4 out of 100, right? You could do a few of these and just recognize, okay, these are all out of 100. And then we can reduce. So if I wanted to reduce, let me zoom in here. So if I wanted to reduce, I could divide both these by 2, divide it by 2, and then you've got 6 out of 50. Well, I can divide by 2 again, reduce by 2, so 3 out of 25. So the simplified fraction is 3 out of 25. This one, I think I can divide everything by 5. So this becomes 1 out of 20. So the fraction is 1/20th. And then this one, I don't think I can reduce 17. I don't think 17 and 100 have a common denominator. So that's our answer. And then anytime you see a fraction, now you can multiply by 10 and move the decimal. So you can look at this even without having to really do too much work. But if you move the decimal over on the top, then move it on the bottom. So our invisible decimal right here is after the 100. So this would be 4 out of 1,000. And then now we can reduce this. So divide everything by 4 maybe, and that becomes 250. So that's 1 out of 250. So let's do one with a fraction just because these are kind of funky, but let's take a look at number 6, and then I'm going to pick a few for you guys to do, and I'll put my answers up here for you to check. So looking at this, 41.5. Okay, so what they did here is they multiplied, they made this a improper fraction. So they did 40 times 2 plus 1 and made this 41 over 2 divided by 100, which really makes this 41 over 2 times 1 over 100. And so now multiplied, I don't think I can cross cancel, and so this would be 41 out of 200. So that's one way of doing it. I don't think I did a good job explaining that up here. So what they didn't divide it. I think I was kind of lost a little bit, but what they did here, because you know this is what this is right here. But what they did is they did 37 times 2 plus 1, which made it 75 over 2, and then divided that by 100. Okay, so that's what they did there. Okay, so I'm going to pick a few of these problems for you, and let's have you guys try them out. Let's do a fraction one, and let's do these 4. So why don't you guys, oh, and let's do it. We didn't do a decimal, right? Let's do a decimal. So why don't you guys work these out and then pause it, work these out, and then check your answers. I'll write them up here on the board. So 5 is 1 1/2. 8 is 8 1/4. 9 is 3 out of 500. 10 is 18 over 25. And 11 is 5/8. So those are the answers in reduced form. Okay, taking a look at the back of the study guide. Now we're turning the fraction into a percentage. So we know that a percentage is really a fraction out of 100, where the denominator is 100, which means if we want to turn a fraction into a percentage, we just want to make sure that we can turn our fraction into something out of 100, and we can multiply an amount to do that. So in this case, if I multiply the bottom by 10, that becomes 100. So then whatever I multiply on the bottom, I want to multiply on the top. And so when I multiply the top, I get 70 out of 100, which is 70%. And so that numerator is what becomes your percentage. Okay, so in this case, I need to think a little bit. What can I multiply 4 by to get 100? Well, done for us down here, we can multiply it by 25. So I figured out that number 4 times 25 is 100. Then I'm going to multiply the top by the same thing. And so then I have 9 times 25, which is 225 out of 100. So the percentage is 225. All right, so taking a look here, what if I have a fraction where I can't multiply the denominator and get a rounded whole number of 100, a full whole number as 100? So in this case, we can use cross multiplication to help us find the unknown. And this is something we did in the last chapter, remember? So if I know that 5/8 is equivalent to something that I don't know out of 100, right? That percentage that I don't know, then I can put an unknown here and cross multiply. So we can multiply 8 times x and then 5 times 100. 5 times 100 is 500. Now we can solve this algebraically by dividing 8 on both sides. And when we divide by 8 on both sides, they actually did this over here for us, but it's 62.5. So it's 62.5% is what 5/8 is. So if you wanted to write it as a fraction or a decimal, either one is fine, but we know that 5/8 is equivalent to 62.5 or 62.5%. So you can do whichever way you feel like works the best for you. If you can very visually see that the denominator, there's a number you can multiply the denominator by to get 100, do that. That's easy, right? If you see that the denominator is this number that you don't think goes into 100, then use cross multiplication. If you wanted to use cross multiplication for everything, that's a guaranteed for sure yes, that's going to work. But you don't have to if it works a different way. So looking at this, I know 2 times 5 is 10, 20 times 5 is 100. So if I multiply top and bottom by 5, then I get 15 out of 100, and that's 15%. So that's that. I can do that. Then I've got 5 times, what can I multiply by? 20, right? If I multiply top and bottom by 20, then I know that the bottom is going to be 100, and 2 times 20 is 40. 40 out of 100 makes this 40%. Okay. 11 over 25. Well, I know that 25 times 4 is 100, so I'm going to do that. 44 over 100 makes this 44%. Okay, so go ahead and work some of these out. I think I'm going to pick 7 and 15 to do with cross multiplication, and then I'll give you a few. Okay, so 15 doesn't go into 100 evenly. So I'm going to multiply by x over 100, cross multiply, I've got 70 times 100, 700 equals 15x. And I know I'm writing small because I want to leave room. So I'm going to divide both sides by 15. And then you can use your calculator on this. You don't have to do this by heart. So get your calculator out and just plug in 700 divided by 15. Oh, that gives me a decimal. So the fraction is, so this amount, not the fraction, the number is 46.6 repeating percent. And that's my answer. So number 7, I'm going to multiply x over 100. So really I have 500 equals 12x. Divide both sides by 12. 500 divided by 12, plug that in, is 41.6 repeating. So I would not have liked to figure this out by heart because I would not have known what to multiply 12 by to get 100. So, or I guess you could have figured out what to multiply it by. You could do 100 divided by 12, right? 100 divided by 12 is 8.3 repeating. So another way to do it is you could do 12 times 8.3 repeating on the top and bottom and do 5 times 8.3 repeating, and then you would get the same thing. So you could do 5 times 8.3 repeating and you would get 41.6 repeating percent. So anyway, I think cross multiplication is a good thing to practice for us anyway, because we'll see that a lot next year and the rest of the year. So let's take a look at these 3. Why don't you guys do these 3? You do these 3 and then pause it, work them out, and then write your answer. So number 5 is 90%. Number 9 is 56.25%. And number 10 is 16%. Okay. All right. So we are doing 2 lessons today. So let's go ahead and, actually I'm going to stop the video here, and then I'm going to make a new video for chapter 7, lesson 2. So I will see you again. Make sure you do both of these lessons in the same day because they're short, and to fit into our schedule to finish this chapter at the time we need to. We're going to do 2 today.